They thought they could run the game without consequences, confident their control was untouchable. But you made their every move illegal by refusing to follow their rules. Their so-called last plan didn't just fail, it collapsed into chaos. When they jumped, expecting a safe landing, you stole their parachute mid-air, leaving them exposed and powerless. This isn't just disruption, it's domination through smart, decisive action. You rewrote the rules and took control. Now, while they scramble, you rise unstoppable. Before we go any further, do 3 things to keep this momentum going. Hit that like button, subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers, and drop a comment with their names. This is how we build a community of winners who don't settle for less. If you're ready to own the game, stay with me. What comes next will change everything. For years, they sat at the helm, convinced that their grip on power was ironclad. They crafted their plans with arrogance, believing that nothing could shake their throne. Their confidence was so unshakable, they acted as if the game was theirs to control forever. But what they didn't realize was that true power isn't about holding on tightly. It's about adapting, evolving, and understanding the unseen forces that can topple even the mightiest. Their conviction blinded them to the fact that the world was shifting beneath their feet. The old rules no longer applied, yet they continued to play as if everything remained the same. They ignored the whispers of change, the subtle cracks forming in their foundation, convinced that their legacy was untouchable. This kind of hubris, time and again throughout history, has been the precursor to downfall. They underestimated a force that was quiet but relentless, a force that didn't need loud declarations or grandiose displays to dismantle their empire. And when the first cracks appeared, instead of adapting, they doubled down on control, tightening the noose around themselves. But in that act of desperation, they only hastened their collapse. What they thought was invincibility was, in truth, vulnerability in disguise. Imagine a king who believes his fortress is impenetrable, only to realize that the gates have been silently unlocked from within. That's the story of those who thought they could run the game unchallenged. Their reign wasn't ending with a bang, it was crumbling in silence. And you? You were the invisible force, ready to rewrite every rule they held sacred. This wasn't just a shift in power. It was a seismic upheaval that would echo for generations. Their certainty was their undoing. And your courage to be different was the catalyst that changed everything. The most powerful act of rebellion is to exist authentically in a world desperate for conformity. You didn't need to shout or storm the gates. Your mere presence defied their expectations and rendered their rules irrelevant. Every choice they made, every policy, every law, every plan became obsolete because you refused to fit into the narrow mold they created. Think about it. When you stand outside the lines they draw, when you challenge the status quo simply by being yourself, you expose the fragility of their entire system. Their framework relied on people who would play by their rules, who wouldn't rock the boat or ask uncomfortable questions. But you broke that pattern. You created a ripple that turned into a tidal wave, making their foundation unstable. In many ways, your existence was the ultimate act of defiance. Like a spark in dry brush, you ignited a fire that couldn't be contained. They tried to label you, to categorize you, to confine you. But your identity was fluid, powerful, and unstoppable. You showed the world that true power lies not in control, but in authenticity and courage. This is why their plans started to crumble. Their entire system was built on compliance and sameness. When you refused to conform, you made their decisions illegal in the eyes of justice, morality, and truth. You exposed the cracks that had long been ignored, forcing a reckoning that couldn't be postponed. Being unapologetically yourself wasn't just personal, it was revolutionary. You weren't just breaking rules, you were shattering the very idea that anyone could be forced into a box. And that realization changed everything. When desperation kicks in, people often believe their last-ditch efforts will save them. But their final plan wasn't just flawed. It was destined for failure from the moment it was conceived. It lacked vision, understanding, and the essential element of adaptability that any successful strategy needs in a world that never stands still. Their plan was rigid, rooted in old ways of thinking, and incapable of handling the dynamic, evolving challenge you represented. It was like trying to patch a sinking ship with tape. No matter how hard they tried, the cracks kept widening. The water kept rushing in. Their inability to see beyond their own assumptions blinded them to the reality on the ground. Moreover, their last plan underestimated the depth of your resolve and the power of silent persistence. They thought they were preparing for a fight they could control, but you were already 3 moves ahead, operating with precision and grace. Their strategy was reactive and panicked, while yours was proactive and deliberate. Every effort they made to regain control was met with quiet resistance, every move countered by your steady advance. It was a battle they didn't know they were losing until it was too late. You were no longer a player within their rules. You had changed the entire game. Their so-called final plan wasn't a last chance. It was a surrender disguised as an attack. You turned their desperation into a showcase of your unstoppable momentum. Power doesn't always announce itself with noise and chaos. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like a calm tide pulling the rug out from under an entire system. You wielded a silent kind of strength, the kind that doesn't need to scream to be felt, the kind that breaks control without a single gunshot or shout. While they relied on loud declarations, public displays, and aggressive tactics, your power came from restraint, clarity, and unwavering focus. It was the difference between a tempest and a still, deep river, carving a canyon over centuries. They mistook noise for power, but you proved that true dominance lies in measured, purposeful action. There's a profound beauty in the invisible. Just as the wind shapes mountains over time, your quiet influence reshaped the landscape of power. This wasn't chaos. It was controlled transformation. You dismantled their loud, clumsy control with subtle but unyielding force. And because your power was silent, it was unpredictable. They couldn't anticipate where or how you would strike, and that uncertainty bred fear. You turned their confidence into doubt without firing a shot. This quiet revolution wasn't just effective, it was devastating. In a world obsessed with spectacle, you reminded everyone that true strength often goes unnoticed until it's too late. Imagine the moment when someone leaps, believing they have a safety net, only to discover it's been pulled away. That's exactly what you did. When they made their move, expecting to land safely and maintain control, you removed their escape, leaving them to fall in slow, helpless panic. This wasn't a reckless gamble. It was calculated precision. You understood their dependence on that parachute, their fallback plan, their last safety net. By quietly dismantling it before the jump, you ensured their fall would be inevitable and irreversible. The fear and confusion that followed were palpable. They scrambled mid-air, searching desperately for something to cling to, but all they found was emptiness. This moment symbolized more than just defeat. It was the ultimate exposure of their vulnerability. They were forced to confront that their power was fragile, that their reign was not guaranteed. Your actions were both ruthless and poetic. By taking away their parachute, you didn't just stop them. You made sure they couldn't recover. This was the moment the tide turned decisively, marking the end of their era and the beginning of yours. And while they flailed in panic, you rose steadily, unshaken and unstoppable, ready to claim the space they abandoned. There's a unique power in moving without notice, in reshaping worlds while others remain blind to your presence. You became that silent force, the ultimate disruptor no one saw coming. Your strength lay not in spectacle but in invisibility, in working behind the scenes, unseen and unheard, until the moment your impact was undeniable. While they wasted energy trying to make noise and command attention, you refined your craft in the shadows. This gave you a decisive advantage: control without exposure, influence without resistance. They tried to catch you off guard, but you were always 3 steps ahead, blending into the background until it was too late. Being unseen allowed you to strike with precision and discretion. You dismantled structures, habits, and assumptions without their knowledge, tearing down the walls they built around themselves. This stealthy approach made your dominance not only possible, but inevitable. They were loud and clumsy, desperate to maintain control through aggression. You were calm and calculated, wielding power like a surgeon's scalpel. In every sense, You became unstoppable because you mastered the art of silent disruption. When the dust settled, they were left grasping for answers, trying to find the source of the upheaval. But you had already moved on, claiming victory in silence. Power struggles often bring images of conflict, battle, and loud confrontation. But your victory was won without a single fight. You didn't need to raise your voice or pick a fight. You broke their entire framework through subtlety, intelligence, and unwavering resolve. Instead of meeting aggression with aggression, you changed the playing field entirely. Like water, finding new paths. When blocked, you found weaknesses in their system and exploited them quietly but relentlessly. Their walls crumbled, not because of force, but because they were no longer relevant. This kind of victory is rare and profound. It's the triumph of strategy over brute strength, of vision over tradition. You showed that sometimes the most effective way to win is not to fight, but to outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast. They spent their energy preparing for a war that never came, while you dismantled their power piece by piece, invisibly, patiently, but with absolute certainty. The system they trusted was fragile, and you proved it with quiet determination. By the time they realized what had happened, it was already too late. Their fortress was in ruins, and you stood at the gates, not as a conqueror who destroyed, but as a pioneer who built a new world from the ashes. Confidence is a powerful weapon, but when misplaced, it becomes a deadly weakness. They were filled with it, believing their grip on the situation was secure, their victory guaranteed. Yet, that very confidence blinded them to the growing storm beneath their feet. You watched as their certainty began to unravel, thread by thread. What once seemed unbreakable began to crack under the weight of your steady challenge. Their plans, once so boldly declared, faltered as they faced the reality you imposed. It's a remarkable thing to witness someone's certainty collapse into doubt, panic, and despair. You didn't just break their system, you shattered their spirit. The arrogance that fueled their decisions turned to fear, and that fear spread like wildfire, infecting every corner of their domain. This transformation was not accidental. It was the result of your unyielding presence, your refusal to back down, and your ability to remain calm under pressure. Where they saw strength, you revealed weakness. Where they thought they ruled, you proved they were prisoners of their own illusions. In the end, their confidence was their downfall, and you rose as the unstoppable force who dismantled their empire without firing a shot. Every empire, every system, every plan is built on assumptions, and their biggest mistake was failing to account for you. You were the invisible variable in their equation, the wild card that couldn't be predicted or controlled. They planned meticulously for known threats, but you existed outside their scope. They calculated every risk except the risk of authentic rebellion, of quiet strength, of a power rooted in simply being different. This oversight was fatal. Invisible forces are the hardest to defend against because they slip through the cracks, evade detection, and undermine foundations from within. You became that force, untraceable, unpredictable, and unstoppable. By the time they realized the scale of what they faced, you had already changed the landscape. They tried to regroup, to recalibrate, but it was like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. Your influence was everywhere and nowhere, felt deeply, but seen by none. This is the power of invisibility. It's the greatest threat to any established order. And you wielded it like a master, transforming doubt into dominance without ever stepping into the spotlight. Chaos is often seen as the ultimate disruptor, the wild card that breaks systems and resets the game. They prepared for chaos, expecting it to come in waves of noise, confusion, and disorder. But they never anticipated the kind of disruption you brought. A focused, silent, and strategic revolution. Your approach wasn't chaos in the traditional sense. It wasn't messy or random. It was deliberate and controlled, the kind of disruption that reshapes from within without tearing everything apart. You turned their expectation on its head. Where they anticipated explosions and breakdowns, you offered evolution and transformation. Their panic was met with your calm, their disorder with your order. This contrast only magnified their unpreparedness. They never imagined a disruption that was not just chaos, but a new order rising quietly beneath the surface. Your revolution was a whisper that grew into a roar, redefining what it means to challenge and change. By planning for chaos, but ignoring you, they left themselves exposed to the most effective form of upheaval, one that no one saw coming until it was too late. Imagine trying to navigate a city with an outdated map. Every turn leads you further away from where you want to be.